Good evening. The infinite way is not organized, has no corporate entity, and has no memberships. Therefore, nobody belongs to the infinite way. This is a result of spiritual guidance which I follow. The object of it is to enable me to present the principles which constitute the infinite way to this world and permit those who respond to them to accept them, follow them if they like, those who do not to turn from them, or else to follow them in whatever measure is possible for them. In other words, that I may have no ties on them, no strings, and that they may be under no obligation to me or to any body. Now, this has made it possible for me to be invited into unity churches, New Thought churches, even Protestant churches, and for the writings, starting with the art of meditation and then practicing the presence, to be accepted in the Protestant churches of all denominations in the United States and in Canada. This enables them to embody any of the principles, any of the teachings into their individual lives, whether the ministers or whether the laymen. And yet remain in the path that for the present may be their religious path. In other words, the copyrights on the infinite way writings are not copyrights for the purpose of making profits, although incidentally they do. The reason for the copyrights is that publishers may be willing to publish them, which they wouldn't do if the writings were in the public domain. In other words, a publisher publishing a book like The Art of Meditation and Practicing the Presence invests more than $10,000 before the book reaches the market. And if it were not copyrighted, the mere fact that a prominent publisher would announce that he is publishing it might encourage 2, 3, or 4 other publishers to do likewise, and then no one would have protection, no one would have the opportunity for profit, which is the motive for business in a capitalistic world. And one, naturally, of which I heartily approve. Now, the principles that are embodied in these writings are not mine. I did not make them up, and I didn't dream them up. They came to me in consciousness, and they are therefore not mine, but they should be made available to anybody, anywhere, at any time, who can accept them, receive them, and respond to them, and that's the way it is. By having no organization, no memberships, no obligations. Those who are led to these writings may embody them to whatever degree they wish and still maintain their organizational freedom. In this way, you will find eventually what we are already witnessing in a measure, that these very principles are being accepted as truth in many religious fields and ultimately will become embodied in the religions of the world. And I feel that's far better than that I should put a ring around them and say they belong to me, and I want either credit for them or cash. I want neither credit nor cash. I'm happy, even though I can't understand how it came about or why, I am happy that I am an instrument through which this has happened. That's enough joy if there weren't glory or money in it. Now, because of this situation, because there are no strings on any student, there are infinite way students of many, many different degrees. There are those who read the books and even ask for help. And to them it is just another form of something desirable or helpful or pleasant. There are some who read these writings but read about everything else there is available in metaphysical or spiritual or religious literature. There are those even who come to classes sometimes, and yet next week we'll be in another class down the street, and a month from now we'll be in still another class in the next town. That's their right, that's their freedom. And there is no fault to be found with this, because no one should ever stop their search for truth until they have found the message which is for them. I have accepted that freedom for myself throughout my years of study, and I rejoice in the fact that we do live in a country where everyone may follow that and no one have the right to dictate what you shall read or what your religious convictions should be or how many times you want to change them. And so it is that it is a wonderful thing that students may go from teacher to teacher or book to book, teaching to teaching, until they have found the one that is for them, the one through which they find that they have been seeking, and the one that they wish to see accepted in the world. Now, we do have students who have come to that point where the infinite way is definitely their way of life. They have been through the mill of other teachings, they have been through the search, they have found that which they are seeking, and they become more closely identified with us in this activity in many different ways. And it is to these students we must look for the, what shall we call that, bond, oneness, togetherness, in order that this message go forward and complete its destiny in the world. Some who are at that stage become active in the healing work or with tape recording work. Others become active in the support of this work in other directions. Each, of course, must fulfill himself or herself at their own level. But the point that I wish to make is this, that those who have come to that recognition that this is their way, these are the ones who form the closer knit body of the infinite way, and who are helping us at every stage of this work. Therefore, as any of you come to that place in your own realization or conviction that this is your way, don't hesitate to let us know about it. Do not hesitate to let us know what advancing steps you are prepared for, because the activity that is available to us and awaiting us is infinite. And as you know, at this moment, we haven't nearly the workers we should have. Some years ago, I was invited to be a guest on a television program in Chicago, just to be interviewed, and it was in the midst of a class, and I think we all took the matter very lightly, as if this were just going to be a pleasant experience. But it turned out to be something quite different than that. The station was the one owned by the Chicago Tribune, I think the largest station in Chicago. And after that broadcast, something happened that had never happened in the entire history of that television station. Every incoming telephone line was used and blocked. Not a line was left open there, and as fast as the calls were finished, it was blocked and reblocked again until they received more calls as a result of that broadcast than they had from any individual program that had ever gone over the air. One of the results of this was the sale of more copies of The Infinite Way than our printers even had printed. But the second result was a flood of letters of people wanting to be healed. And that was the last television appearance, because we haven't the workers to take over the responsibility of that amount of healing work. Because it isn't a matter merely of Chicago, it's that when it starts, it spreads and spreads rapidly. We're in an age where if you think something in Hawaii today, they know about it in New York an hour from now. And if something is in demand in New York today, you can be assured that it's going to be in demand here tomorrow. And that means that there must be thousands of students, not tens or dozens, thousands, ready to respond to these calls in many different ways. And naturally, it can only be those students who have gone that far that they know that this is the message for them and that they wish to dedicate themselves or their time or their efforts or their money to this activity. Then we know where we are in this expanding activity. We know to whom we can turn and for what we can turn to them and the degree of their interest. Always remember that we have no other way of knowing, because we don't ask questions. These principles are turned loose, and we don't ask anyone to what degree they have accepted them or to what degree they are Infinite Way students, even though we do hear many times of how little they have actually received and responded to the message. Now, wherever you are and wherever you live, always please remember that your bond with us of the Infinite Way is a voluntary one. It is one purely of love, cooperation, service, and that at no time is anyone bound to anything that they do not bind themselves to. And they cannot bind themselves to anything of a physical or material nature with us, because this bond is purely spiritual. Thank you for that. Now, What should the proper economic attitude be of the Infinite Way student when faced with economic hardships or pressing bills? You understand, of course, that there cannot be one answer to that question. It depends what state or stage of consciousness one finds themselves in. How long has one been a student of the Infinite Way? To what degree do they understand the principles? How far are they along in absolutely depending on spiritual principles alone? What is their own attitude by now on this subject? Actually, if one has read enough of the Infinite Way message to have any grasp of its principles at all, they would know that economic lack or economic abundance are merely two opposite ends of the same stick, and that both of these have to be overcome. They would know that economic abundance is no more staple or guaranteed or permanent than is economic lack. And therefore, as a student of the Infinite Way, whether or not they are momentarily on the lack side or the abundance side, they have the same demonstration to make, both of them. They both must make the transition from a material sense of supply to a spiritual sense of supply. The Infinite Way is not a message that turns economic lack into economic abundance. Actually, its purpose isn't even to turn physical disease into physical health. The results seem to work out in that way, but actually our work is to surrender the physical, the material sense of existence for the realization and demonstration of the spiritual life. Therefore, any problem that comes to an Infinite Way student is not a problem to be overcome. It is an opportunity for working through that particular facet of the material life or sense of life to the spiritual. In other words, and I have been through this experience, when lack and limitation is facing us, when we're experiencing it, my attitude was, and it's going to stay this way until I work out of it spiritually, until I attain the secret of spiritual supply. In my very earliest days, I had abundance, plenty of it. From the time I was 16 and a half years of age on, I was traveling the United States and Europe and enjoying the best. But that was no guarantee of supply, and of course I lived to experience the very opposite of that, lack and limitation. Now, at that time, it would not have been too difficult to place myself in a business activity that would have restored at least a measure of that abundance. But I would have been dissatisfied, because at no time in my life has money been the object of life, or abundance, or wealth. Not that I don't enjoy it, but that is not the object of my life. The object of my life is to find the secret of life, the secret of the laws behind this life, the secret of what makes this world go round harmoniously, because there must be just as much of a law of abundance for us as there is for trees or grass plots or seas full of fish or air full of birds. It cannot be that God has made cattle on 1,000 hills and billions of stars and billions of fruit trees with hundreds of billions of fruit and gold in the ground and all of the rest of these gems, and yet meant for us to lack. Well, no, our lack must come from an ignorance of the law. Our lack must come from a lack of understanding of God's law of abundance, or how to become one with God so that we can enjoy those promises, Son, thou art ever with me, all that I have is thine. Why should such a statement be in Scripture if it isn't true? Why should the Master have tried to teach us supply by multiplying loaves and fishes and proving how abundant it is, without limit, always with baskets full left over? Why, if it is not meant for us eventually, and if eventually, why not now, come into that awareness of life which is lived by the grace of God? And therefore, my attitude at the time was, let this go on as long as it wants, until I meet it through understanding the spiritual law of supply. Not only understanding it, but demonstrating it. And I did. I stuck with it, even to the point of having no coffee at times and walking 7 miles twice a day to get to my office. And I wasn't ashamed of it, and I didn't hide it, and I didn't feel that it was a lack of demonstration or any disgrace, and I don't now. I feel, as I felt then, this couldn't happen if I knew the law of God. And if I don't know the law of God, there isn't any amount of money that's going to make me happy or satisfied, because it may be just as fleeting as what I've had before. And actually, I received my answer on the last one of those days in which I found myself without coffee, walking that 7 miles. And it was on that walk that the revelation finally came. Probably these revelations may come to different students in different ways. I can't limit God by saying that there is only one solution to the subject of abundance, or that there is only one truth that has to be known. I only know the experience that took place with me. I was pondering this very question. How can this be? How can this be? There is an answer. There is an answer. And something within me told me that I didn't know God, for that was the answer. To know Him aright is life eternal. It must be eternal, it must be infinite. But I thought I knew all about God. I thought I knew that God was mind, and God was life, and God was love, and God was substance, God was spirit, God was principle. God is all those wonderful things that the Bible and the metaphysical writings say God is. So therefore, how can you say I don't know what God is? And you must remember, I was talking to myself. We call that now contemplative meditation. And then I thought, yes, that's right. How do I know that God is mind? I only read it in a book. How do I know that God is law or life or love? I've only read it in a book. Actually, I have no knowledge that that's truth. None whatsoever. How then can I find out what God is if I am not to accept what someone says in a book? Well, like we find all information, each one has to find their information in life for themselves. And so I must find out, what is God? What is God? And again I thought, mind? No, mind, that's a word up here. That can't be God. Life is another word up here. That can't be God. It's a word. Love, truth, all of these synonyms, they can't be God. Those are just words in my mind, or words in a book. You can't find God in anyone's mind or in anyone's book. Now what is God? And the answer didn't come. Then the thought came. Know thyself, O man. That may be the beginning of it. Know thyself. Let's come back now, and what is man? What is man? Well, there again, if you just want quotations from a book, I can give you a lot of them. But I wasn't interested then in what any book said. I wanted to know, what is man? Well, that shouldn't be too difficult, because I am man, so I should know what I am. And at that moment, I became conscious of my feet, one foot stepping out after the other. And I stopped and looked down and realized, well, that isn't man, because that's not me. That's not me. Those feet are mine. They're not me. There must be a me separate and apart from those feet, because those feet belong to me. And I went up to my knees, and I went up to my waist, and I went up to my chest, and I went all the way up to my hair. And actually, I couldn't find myself. I wasn't there. All I could find was my body. Sure, feet and knees and stomach and chest and neck and face and forehead and eyes and ears, and finally a big head of hair. I used to wear it very long in those days. But nowhere could I find myself. And I really went up and down that body, right from the top to the bottom, without once finding me. Not a place could I find me. And that puzzled me. And I said, now we're up against it. I can't find myself. Where am I? What am I? Who am I? And then the word I registered. That's the secret. I am I. I am I, and I am not in these feet. I am not in this body. I am I. I can't be encompassed in a piece of flesh. I can't be encompassed in space, because the real meaning of I is God. That's why it's spelt with a capital. I is the spirit of me, the truth of me, my being. And that isn't in the body. That's infinite. That's eternal. That is outside the body. That must fill all space. That I, which is my true identity, the Master says, is one with God. I and my Father are one. Oh, then that makes a different relationship. If I am I, not confined to a body, but actually the Son of God, one with God, the manifestation of God's own being, no wonder it says, I will never leave you nor forsake you, and all that I have is thine. No wonder. Then, this I that I am can never demonstrate supply, because the I that I am must be the very embodiment of all the qualities and quantities of God, and therefore I embody supply. I am spiritual, and so supply must be spiritual. How can you think of it in terms of money, properties, investments, when it must be spiritual? If I am spirit, supply is spiritual, and it must be where I am. Ah, this is a new light, because I had quite a few human feelings, emotions, about certain places where money could have come to me and didn't, and toward those through whom it could have come and it didn't. And now all of a sudden I realized I, who am one with God, am looking to somebody for money, for supply, for income, when I should be the one who am able to feed 5,000 and have 12 baskets full left over. I am the one through whom this infinity should be flowing. And I'm treating myself as if I were a beggar, waiting for someone to bring me supply, and if not someone, at least God. And so the position was reversed, and I realized never again can I be interested in the subject of supply except to be sure that I'm letting it flow out from me and through me. Never again dare I permit myself to think of supply as incoming. And only once after that did I make the mistake. Only once that I can recall did I make the mistake of thinking in terms of getting. And that was right here in Honolulu, when a small group of students came to me one day and said, I was living in a hotel, you ought to have a home here. Why don't you have a nice home with some ground around it, so that when students want to come and visit you or meditate or have some class, that you'd have a place to welcome them and a place where they could visit you. And that was when I made my mistake. Oh, I said, I'm perfectly willing, and any time the students feel they have a need for that and want to provide it, I'll be there. That night, I was awakened out of a sleep, and the voice spoke to me and said, you taught them incorrectly. And then I sat up. What is it? What is it? What did I do? And all of that came back to me. And the voice very definitely said, if a teacher is dependent on a student, then the student should be the teacher. It is the teacher's function to show forth the nature of God, the healing grace of God, the supplying grace of God. It is not the student who should be supporting a teacher. It is the teacher who should be able to feed the multitudes of students, whether in food or clothing or spiritual truth. You can't have a teacher pouring it out in spirit and then saying, but I'm dependent on you, in another direction. And you may be assured that I said the very next day to those same students, I made a mistake. When the time is right, when the occasion requires it, I will have such a place. And it wasn't too long after until we had 22 Kailua Road, which beautifully served that purpose, and now Holly Cove. You see, and nobody had to take up a collection to buy it. You see, my experience was brought about by the realization of my true identity. I am not a beggar. I am heir of God, joint heir to all the heavenly riches. I am one with my Father, and all that the Father hath is mine, and I need not take thought what I shall eat or what I shall drink, or wherewithal I shall be clothed, and it flows. And every need of the infinite way has always been met from its very beginning. Now, I wouldn't exchange that year of lack and limitation for all the money that our richest families possess. Because not only have I had the joy of seeing the spiritual unfoldment, but I know now that wherever I may be and under whatever circumstances, I need not be surprised if the ravens bring me food. I need not be surprised if manna falls from the sky. I need not be surprised whatever form of supply comes to me or through what means. Because now I know that it isn't a question of being dependent on man whose breath is in his nostrils, not even dependent on his gratitude or dependent on his goodwill. It is absolutely an independence. It is a realization of our true identity. Once we know that we are not man whose breath is in his nostril, that we are not the beggar sitting at the gate waiting for someone's favor in any guise, once we understand that God has manifested himself on earth as our individual being, the heavens declare the glory of God, the earth showeth forth his handiwork. What about us? Why, we must be the instrument or that place where God shows forth his greatest glory unto this world. We must be showing forth a greater glory than the stars in the sky. They're inanimate. They are not the infinite wisdom of God itself, but just an offshoot. But we have that mind which was also in Christ Jesus. We have that life, we have that love. We are the son, the heir, the joint heir. But again, all this week our lessons have been, none of this is true to you, except in proportion to your conscious awareness of it, your conscious realization of it, your consciously abiding in this truth, and that's what brings it into your experience. But 1,000 shall fall at thy left, and 10,000 shall fall at thy right, because they are not abiding in the Word and letting this Word abide in them. Now, our relationship with God is oneness. But that's the truth of everyone on the face of the earth, human, animal, vegetable, and mineral. We're all one with God, and there's only one life permeating our being. But until we become consciously aware of this, until we abide in this truth and let this truth abide in us and finally rest in the Word, it cannot come forth into expression. Now, in these 30 years that I'm in this work, I have had 3 physical claims to meet. And what do you think my attitude has to be? That this is a problem that I must get rid of, or that this is another step forward that I have to take in understanding and in demonstration? It's no sin if we fall by the wayside. It's no sin if we fall into some measure of temporary relief. The sin is if we are so desperate to make the demonstration that that becomes the object of our lives. It mustn't be. Health is not the object of our lives in the infinite way. Realization of God is our goal, and health is the added thing. Therefore, a sickness is but an opportunity to prove it, an opportunity to receive in consciousness some vital truth that may change the entire nature of our lives. Just think, in 1921, in one of the largest hospitals in New York City, the death sentence was passed on me, and I was told that I could not live longer than 3 months. That was the time. Wind up your business, because there is no help for you. Now, just supposing there had been help, Just supposing some doctor could have cured me, or the hospital. Where would I be today? Heaven only knows. But with that verdict, I had to turn to the spiritual teachings, and inside of 3 months I was completely healed. And I've remained healed ever since. Now, I suppose that by every human standard, I was a tragic case at that time. Heaven forbid that I should have missed the experience. It had to be mine for all of the rest of this to follow. Certainly we do know that there are people in the world, and good health and abundant supply represents about the height of happiness and peace for them. And of course they must have it, and they must get it in whatever way they can. That represents their state of consciousness. But if we are really on the spiritual path for something other than merely getting healed, then we have to face a situation like this as if God sent it to us for a blessing. Because once this problem of lack is met through spiritual understanding, you'll never have it again. It can never return. It's done with. You have passed a way station, a milestone. You'll never have to backtrack over that demonstration again. And so it is with these major problems of health. Once we have attained health through a spiritual realization, we have very few physical problems, especially of any great importance, for the rest of our days. Unless we forget the warning of the Master, go and sin no more lest the worst thing come upon you. Of course, if we can be tempted back into the ways of the world, then we will outpicture the ways of the world again, because what our outer life is the manifestation of our state of consciousness. And so in the degree that we understand spiritual principles, our outer experience becomes spiritually harmonious, even though it appears to the world as a well body or a filled purse. It is for this reason that we in this work, even when we speak of our problems, have no right ever to actually believe within ourselves that they're problems, because they're not. Those are our opportunities for spiritual growth, spiritual unfoldment, spiritual demonstration, which lifts us above this thing. Do you not know that here is a note that I made many months ago, but certainly it fits in right here. In the infinite way, we make the transition from man of earth, acted upon by forces, powers, influences beyond ourselves, to man whose being is in Christ, where the infinite invisible within, without, and all about us is the only power, influence, or force acting upon our experience. This transition must be consciously made by consciously declaring and realizing that we are no longer under the law, but live by grace, that we no longer love, hate, or fear the visible universe, but yield ourselves to the influence of the infinite invisible which formed us and gave us dominion by grace. As humans, we are under the law, legal law, economic law, health laws, food laws, climate laws. Bit by bit, demonstration by demonstration, principle by principle, realization by realization, we rise and ultimately come out from under the law unto a living under grace, which Paul described as, I live, yet not I, Christ liveth my life. And so I have no responsibility for it. Now I have letters always with students speaking of their dissatisfaction with their unfoldment, the lack of progress, slowness of progress. Today, in my mail is a letter from Nigeria, from a minister with whom I've been working for over a year, bringing him to the spiritual light. And today he writes, I am so dissatisfied with my progress, I'm losing courage. And I have to write back to him, in just a year, there's another 1,000 million years ahead of us. No one is ever going to accomplish the transition from man whose breath is in his nostril to the man who has his being in Christ merely by studying for a year or meditating for a year. Why, if the kingdom of God were that easily attained, well, look how many people would have it. Look how few have it. But the way is straight and narrow, and few there be that enter. This is the most difficult task. This is the most difficult life there is. It's far easier for any person to say, I'm going to own $1 million and succeed, than to say, I'm going to attain spiritual life and succeed. Far easier to accomplish anything in the human world than in the spiritual, because in the spiritual, we're called upon to die before we can gain what we're seeking. Don't ever forget that you have to die before you can gain your spiritual life. You don't gain it by giving up smoking or drinking or eating meat. You don't gain it by studying for a few years or having some classes. Oh, if it was only that easy. You give it up by dying daily. Every single day of the week, some trace of humanhood either leaves us or is sent about its business. Every problem is an opportunity to work out of whatever the situation may be. If that sounds too difficult, it's really better that you do not start. Be satisfied just to be a metaphysician who can call a practitioner and ask for help and get it. Or do a few pages of reading and feel that you're getting close to God. But if that doesn't satisfy you, and there's a drive in you that compels you to go forward, that compels you to find God, then find the teacher or the teaching that brings out in you the response, this is for me, and then stick with it until you attain. Try to put yourself back 2,000 years. Think of yourself as one of those Hebrews living under the terror of that awful Hebrew organization as it was at that time. And it was bad. And at the same time, living under Caesar. And that was bad too. Think of their desperation, their desire for freedom. And then just imagine Jesus Christ appearing on the street one day. And now think what would happen to you if you were one of that multitude, watching him, hearing him, and feeling within yourself, this is it. I don't know what, I don't know why. This is it. And then hearing him say, but you must leave mother and father, sister and brother for my sake. Sell all that thou hast to buy this pearl. Leave your nets and follow me. And then you'll know how very difficult spiritual attainment is. And then you'll understand why your progress is slow, and you'll be satisfied. You won't complain. And you'll realize if they had to walk those steps, so do we. If they had to die out of their Jewishness, and I wish you could only watch how slowly Peter died out of his Judaic religion and beliefs, to such a degree that years after the crucifixion he was still such a good Jew that he wouldn't eat the meat of a pig, and that he had to observe Saturday as his Sabbath, and that he still believed the message couldn't be given to anybody but Hebrews, only they were worthy of it. Think of that. Think of a man after 3 years of work with Jesus Christ who still hadn't left his old religion or been able to grasp the meaning of the new. Oh, he eventually did. But it was a struggle. For Saul of Tarsus, it was easier. Once the Christ experience came to him, he dropped in that instant every trace of his Judaism except one. He kept the devil, only he called it mortal mind, and then he went out to battle it every day. If only he could have overcome that one Judaic belief of a devil, he really would have given the world a teaching far beyond anything ever known. But he did. He kept the devil, only he impersonalized it as carnal mind. But it still had all the qualities of the devil. Oh, I knew that was going to happen, but it can't.